great to have you sit down with us here at Miles Ahead and talk about your relationship with Selmer. Tell us a little bit about, for those who don't know you very well, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you got started on the saxophone.
Well, Russell, I grew up in a small town called Benton, and it's in southern Illinois, probably about an hour north of the Kentucky border by Metropolis. The town has about 6,500 people, and I started band when I was in 5th grade, so I was 11 years old and continued all through high school and college.
Now, I know you went to school at Murray State. Can you tell us about how you got there and who your sax professor was?
So I wasn't for sure what I was going to do, and someone asked me if I had auditioned at Murray yet. And I said, they have a music program at Murray, and they said, sure they do. And from what they'd heard, it was really good. So I set up an appointment, went down and auditioned, and met Scott Erickson, the saxophone teacher there, and also double reeds, and Dennis Johnson, who's the director of bands there, and the flute professor. Played for them, had a wonderful audition, and everybody was really nice, and I just really felt comfortable and at home there. And I had received one of the top chairs in the state of Illinois that year in the top band, and I had several schools that were trying to recruit me and going there, and Scott kept calling me like every weekend. And so I decided that I was going to go at Murray because that's where I felt most comfortable, and I had a lot of great opportunities there.
So, since we're getting into where you went to school and that sort of thing, tell us about your practice regimen from a high school, and then as you got into college, and then your post-collegiate schedule with the ensembles that you play in, the new music, that sort of thing. Where do you find the time, and how do you do it?
Well, when I was in high school, I practiced about 3 hours every night. I would get home either after marching band rehearsal or jazz band or small chamber ensembles, and I'd do my homework, have dinner. About 9 o'clock in the evening, I'd start practicing, and I'd be done at midnight, go to bed, get up for the next day. And during that time, my teacher had me doing long tones, scales, altissimo, even though I hadn't really started voicing at that point. Working on competitions for solo and ensemble, and also for All-State, because Illinois is really large, is very competitive saxophone-wise, so in my district or area, I had to be first chair in order to make it to All-State. And so I was practicing all the time, and the audition process for that was very extensive. We had 2 etudes we had to play. We had to do a major and minor scale sheet within 3 minutes, so 24 scales in 3 minutes. And then we had to do sight reading on top of that. And the sight reading was always really challenging. So I was constantly pushing myself for technique and for sight reading and getting those etudes where they needed to be. So that was a big part of my practice regimen in high school, and to be successful in that, because those were things that I wanted to do at the time. When I started at Murray, Scott Erickson was a graduate of University of Michigan, studying with Donald Senta. So he started me off doing voicing as soon as I started. And once I had developed voicing, that really opened up my world in the altissimo technique.
Here you go. Cory, give us a couple of examples of what you're talking about with your voicings.
Same thing. And then I'll go to C and C sharp and do the same thing. And that's to help do flexibility, develop flexibility in the altissimo, so then when you have to play a solo and you have a bunch of runs, all that voicing technique that you developed helps smooth out the altissimo register, such as
us, earlier you were talking about some of the articulations. Show us some of the newer slap tongue, that sort of thing that, most students before they hit college, they're not going to hear this. So tell us what you're talking about. Show us a little bit about that.
Well, slap tonguing is you're covering the reed with your tongue, and you're covering the entire reed with your tongue, and you're creating a vacuum or seal so that when you pull the tongue back off, it makes a pop sound, which emulates kind of a string pizzicato. Or you can put a little bit of air behind it, and you can actually have a slap tongue with some pitch sound to that.
So tell us, Cory, as a Selmer artist, of course you're playing a Selmer instrument. Tell us about your setup and what you prefer.
Well, all my saxophones are Selmer Series 3. They are just fantastic instruments, both sound-wise, intonation, and response is just fantastic on these instruments. Even though I think a lot of people have advertised it as a classical instrument, I think it's great for both jazz and classical, and know many jazz players that use them for jazz and classical. My setup, my alto, I'm using a S90 180 facing mouthpiece with an Ishimori solid silver ligature. The mouthpiece has been refaced by James Bunty at Cincinnati Conservatory. He does great work, so if I ever need my mouthpiece tweaked, I just usually give him a call, and he does fantastic work. My reed that I use on all my saxes are a Van Doren size 3 traditional blue box. On soprano, I use the new Concept soprano mouthpiece. Fantastic mouthpiece, really love that. I played on a refaced C-Star for a very long time, and I recently switched to the Concept with a solid silver Ishimori ligature on that mouthpiece. And on my tenor, I use an S90 180 facing size 3 reeds with just a standard ligature.
So, Selmer product, Selmer artist. Tell us a little bit about the journey as becoming a Selmer artist.
Well, Selmer doesn't really, they're so big and they've been around for 125 years, and they're considered the best saxophone in the world. I believe that's a testament for them being around for 125 years, longer than any other saxophone company that's out there today. I've always wanted to be a Selmer artist. All my favorite saxophone players were Selmer artists and clinicians, so that was one of my goals, that I wanted to be a part of such a wonderful company. And I had a friend and colleague in France that I had talked to that was one of their top clinicians, and we had talked about getting on as an artist with Selmer, and he knew of my playing. He'd heard me play and listened to my CD and was really impressed with everything, and he said he was going to talk to Selmer Paris about me being on as an artist and to be patient, because sometimes I think Americans can be a little bit impatient, though I don't feel like I'm impatient. I think just in general, sometimes Europeans think we're that way. And about a month later, he got in touch with me and said, Selmer Paris is waiting for your contact. And so I contacted Selmer Paris, and they said, we're real impressed with things that you've done, and we'd like for you to contact our USA branch, Con Selmer. And so I did, and I had some Selmer artists here in USA that were interested in having me on board. And so, they called me up and said, welcome to the family, and here I am.
Some of the Selmer artists you look up to and that sort of thing. Tell us about your favorite saxophonists, your educators, ones that really have helped you develop as a player.
I'd have to say somebody who was huge for me In high school, I was doing, I think my sophomore year, the Claude T. Smith Fantasia has the whole middle section that I just played earlier on the video up an octave. Though I was working that on for solo and ensemble, I was playing the A's in the beginning and on the cadenza the altissimo E, but I did not know, because it's not written up an octave in the middle section, the slow section of the piece. And so my private instructor got this CD when she's up at St. Louis, and she goes, I want you to listen to this guy playing saxophone. And I said, sure. And he started to play, and she goes, the middle section, you're going to be blown away. And it was Dale Underwood with the Texas Tech University. And he played the middle section up the octave, and I was just totally in awe of his technical playing and his extreme control over the altissimo. It was beautiful, controlled, amazing sounding, and I just it became an obsession after that. I was like, I have to be able to play that, and how can I get my altissimo with that same type of quality? And he was probably a big thing, because I just started listening to his sound, and like classically, jazz players, when they find artists that they really like, they start listening to them and mimic what they're doing, and as they develop as players, they go, well, I think I'm going to do this, and they stray away from that and do their own thing. Well, I started to mimic his playing, and eventually, I got similar setup, virtually the same setup that he had, and then later on I kind of decided this is the way I wanted to go, and kind of went off and did my own thing. So Dale Underwood was one, and today I listen to a lot of the French saxophonists and French playing, Habanera Quartet, Claude DeLong, Jerome Larin, a lot of those French saxophonists I'm really listening to today. Saxophone ensemble Squillante, just amazing tones and fantastic technique and articulation. And so those are some of the ones I started listening to from the start, and that I listen to now, that really keep me shaping and changing the way I play and how I sound. And probably another influence for me was Eric Stem, composer at IUS and producer of the New Dynamics record label, and he has been a big help with me as far as playing and recording, and I did my first CD with him as producer, and he's been a big influence and help, and he's wrote some pieces for me in orchestra and solo and piano, so we've had a nice collaboration going as well, along with Perry Goldstein, which wrote the piece Kaleidoscope for me for chamber ensemble, which is a fantastic work, and really enjoyed recording and playing that piece.
That's awesome. I think some of my favorite performances that you've done is with Krista Wallace-Boas. Fantastic piano player.
Yes, she is a fantastic player and wonderful collaborator, and she just makes the music sound that much better, because she's just an amazing pianist.
So to wrap this up and to get back to how you have a relationship here at Miles Ahead, tell us about what it's like to go to the factory. You're going to pick out an instrument, and then tell us the advantages of being able to sit down and play for a saxophonist like Miles, and get his influence and adjustments on your instrument.
Well, Miles is fantastic and a great repair tech. I just usually, if I have an issue with my horn or emergency comes up, I've got a leak, which, he says I'm really picky about things, but when you get to know your horn really well, when a note's not quite working the way it should, it just feels differently. So he says, come on in, and, you get to go in the back, and he starts to work on your horn and make some adjustments, and here, try this, and then I'll play something, and I'll say, well, this note doesn't quite feel right. It's still a little resistant. And he'll say, let me see it, and he'll adjust it, and it, is so much better. Or I'll play a note, and he'll go give it to me, immediately, and he'll adjust it, and he'll give it back, and it'll play great. And he'll basically spend as much time as you need to get the horn set up just the way you want it and have it playing to its full capacity that a horn should feel. So he's a fantastic repair work, and will do what he can to help you out and having your horn play just the way you'd like it to play.
And this is in addition to when you go to the factory, you're going to go through to hand select an instrument, how many horns are you going to play?
Well, I've selected probably in the last couple of years, I don't know, 10. I've hand selected about 10 different Selmer saxophones up there, and they set out depending. If I had 15 out at a time, I've had 12 out at a time, and it's kind of fun. For me, it's like a kid in a candy store going up there and getting to do that kind of stuff and playing different horns. But first thing I do when I hand select an instrument is I want it to be the best possible instrument that a student can have. And Selmer's, each one of their saxophones have a slightly different personality or character or slightly different tone quality. I mean, they're all the same as far as that same wonderful Selmer sound, but they all vary. They could be a little darker or a little bit brighter or a little bit brassier. And so when I'm picking out an instrument, I'm looking for something that's really really resonant, very full sounding, and very rich in sound. And also, probably the number one thing I look for is intonation. So when I start playing a horn, if pitch is a little off and I can't, switch to a different neck and the pitch be better or corrected, then that horn is completely out. The next thing I look for is the tone. Does it have that wonderful tone that I expect in one of their saxophones? Is it as rich? Is it as full as I like it to be? If it's not, then that horn's kind of off to the side. And then last thing I look for is, and this isn't necessarily an important factor, but for me it is the feel. How's the key work feel? Is it just feel really elegant and right there under your fingers, or is it, a little rough on the edges? I mean, I can't really describe on how it is, but I know, when I put my hands on the instrument, how I want it to feel. Right under the fingers, smooth, everything sealing. And, some of that key work can be tweaked by a tech. I mean, that's not any big deal. But that's what I look for because, if you're spending, pretty good money on an instrument, you want the best possible horn that you can get for the price. And, I just hand selected recently a horn for one of my students, and he absolutely loves it and sounds great on it, and it's everything that a horn should be. And I have to say, pulling one off the shelf and shipping it to you, it may not have the best pitch. It may not have the best tone quality possible. So I think doing a hand selected instrument is really worth the while, and you're for sure getting what you're paying for.
And I heard 2 other people play that instrument. It was a fine horn.
Great.
Well, thanks, Cory. I appreciate you wrapping this up with us and being involved. And come see us at Miles Ahead, and you can have a hand-selected Selmer artist like Cory Barnfield take care of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russell.